you have to kind of do something to encourage the next generation, kind of
Absolutely.
push them forward.
And I'm
And
sure that will stick with her. Seeing her art look so vibrant like that, she'll be drawn for a lifetime.
yes, and as a father, I tend to my daughter's into art. She loves drawing and stuff, but it's different when you do something for somebody else that isn't family, because my daughters don't listen to anything I have to say when it comes to art. Like, I'm trying to teach them, look, you could do this, you could do that. I got this, Dad. You do your thing. You keep drawing those girls. I'm over here. Eventually, you kind of like want to reach out to the
Of
younger
course.
generation in one way or another. And even though sometimes I bump heads with my daughter, it's kind of nice to do it for somebody else's daughter or somebody else's son or somebody else's cousin or somebody that wants to get into the industry, wants to draw, and they come up to the tables at the shows and they're like, oh, they're wide-eyed and they're innocent, and like you don't want to disappoint them. You want to give them the best experience possible.
All right. So Phil, I'm gonna, give you the steering wheel here. I know that you've commissioned a lot from Jose recently, and you have some really impressive pieces. What do you got for us?
I think we should start with the ones Jose's currently working on.
Okay. The
And this,
in progress
yeah,
or in
this these,
process pieces.
yeah. I
Well,
think
these
this
are
is nice.
all the completed pieces that I have for Phil. He's given me quite a little project here. Okay, so let's talk about these Sams here. Sam de la Rosa. There are one, two, three, four, five books. It's a connecting cover. So the first one was it's all Venomized characters. So there's Phage, which I think is probably my favorite. Okay, here we go.
Oh yeah, that is nice.
It's killer.
So this is Phage, and mind you, since it was a connecting cover, it was a little more homework for me to work on because I had to make sure that the background blended seamlessly into each other, as well as some of the characters, because you had certain like the hand, maybe part of the hand would be on the other sketch cover. So you had to make sure that the color transition was spot on. So then the next one is this one is called Agony.
This one's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I like that. Very, very cool.
So as you could see, you have like the next character over here, their arm is here, and then you have like part of her arm somewhere else, and then you know, Phage, one of his spikes is over on this side. So I had to make sure to kind of line the books together and have everything kind of blend seamlessly into each other, not just with the background, but with the characters and the tones for
And
each
so
of them.
how many books are connected here?
Five.
5. Okay.
All right,
Wow,
so
that
we'll
is
move a little bit faster here so we can
impressive.
go through. So the next one is
Yeah, these have been in the work for a long
Riot.
time.
Now, Riot, I took a little bit of a little creative liberty on it because Riot in general is kind of gray, just nothing but gray. But then
Okay.
I also do a little bit of researching on the characters, um, using Google, social media, whatnot. And I saw this one, which was like a Riot with like a Carnage takeover. And I thought it was really interesting. And since I didn't see pretty much anything as far as like any distinguishing characteristics on this particular character like the other ones, I felt it was a good idea to throw a little bit of that color in there so that it would stand out just as much as the rest of the other characters. Because then you just have like nothing but gray on this character, and then everybody else is so vibrant and colorful. So this I this is
Beautiful.
so you can see like these are the veins
Right.
coming out, like the whole like the takeover, Carnage takeover.
You have to have some way to catch people's attention to draw their eyes to that cover. So that sounds like it was definitely the way to go.
Then the next one is Scream.
Which is probably the most vibrant one.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
I showed these to Sam, and Sam already posted this one on his page.
Okay.
It's a nice one.
Yeah. I just like the way that the title lettering blends in with the hair. I mean, that's something
Does
that immediately, well, it's not, it just fits well. Like if you look at the actual shadow around the venom
Hmm.
and the color of the hair there, like that works well.
That's also when you have to take certain creative liberties when it comes to doing these type of things because you have to work around the titles. And the Venom title is interesting because it's there's a lot of slopes and curves and things like that, so you have to be very careful how you color. And since it has a nice red outline, I try and keep the background dark so that it could pop. Like this one is actually my favorite.
Flasher.
This one is Lasher. This one I like because of the way that the Venom really pops out there, and I just like the green. I'm a big
That's,
fan of the green.
yeah, it's a nice contrast.
So I think out of the three, this one and Phage are my two favorite of the five. So they connect together. If I had like about three more arms, I could put them all together in one side, but I can't. Um, and then of course, there's you guys have seen this one. This is the Psylocke.
Yes, recently posted. This
A lot
was
of buzz
just
around
up.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just such a great use of and blending of the pinks, the purples, the navy,
And
and the
one thing I
psychic
like is,
knife. Ooh,
and then the way that he showed the whips and the way it came up to this being the final product. I was pretty amazed to see that because I don't normally get to see that. It was definitely a treat to see it in person at MegaCon, but um, when he's actually at home, taking his time because he's Mr. Perfect. He likes to take his time.
Well, it's like everything else. You have to give the best work you can if you're expecting to get paid a certain amount of money. Um, it comes with the territory.
For
If you
sure.
want me to give you a 5 minute sketch at a convention, then you're gonna get a 5 minutes sketch of worth of work,
right.
and don't expect it to look like something that I would take home and work
Mhm.
on my time on my leisure time.
Absolutely. It's common sense. People got to understand what you can produce when you have real time to think things through and, really perfect the process. It's going to show.
This one is I actually enjoyed this one the most out of all the other projects that he gave me because it was drawn by his daughter, by Phil's daughter. So I had a lot of fun working on this because it kind of reminded me of my own daughter who's into art as well. So she did the lines and I did the coloring work on it. So, it
Very
was
cute.
great. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like, okay, let me try and make this as nice as I possibly can to like push her lines out as much as I can.
And you
And
succeeded. I mean, this
so
is this
Oh
is
yeah,
really
she
cool.
loved it. She loves it.
so this one was a fun project for me. I really enjoyed this one. I like stuff like this. I really do. I did want to show you something. Um, the piece that I'm working on for Phil is I have it in the on the drawing table right now, so I can't really I don't want to mess around with it, but this is kind of like the process of what I normally do, like with like say his piece. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah.
so this is me basically, like sketching something like this where I really wanted to take my time and get everything the way I really wanted it, and the pose and the arching of the back and the legs and everything. I said, you know what? Let me sketch it on my sketch pad, and then you know transfer it over. So that's what's happening right now. I'm doing the transfer over, and I'll be I've been taking pictures of the transition. Um, from the transfer to the pencils to eventually the colors and then the inks and the finals. So you're gonna see that also on social media um, pretty soon.
Let me tell you what you got so far is very impressive. I mean, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing how that piece develops.
I'd say me personally, I already feel like that's an AP piece right there, but it might not be. I know when it comes to APs, it's more of what Jose. I don't know. I mean, as far as what I consider an AP, a lot of artists are doing their own exclusives, and they do like a 1 to 10, AP covers or foils or metals or whatever the case is. So it's really different when you're seeing it on a sketch cover, more or less than it's something that's printed. So it's a different. I guess it's a different thought process, but it's the same idea.
I've done things like that before where I've done a piece of original artwork on a cover, and I felt so good about it that I've reached out to the owners and I say, hey, do you mind if I make this into a published cover for one of my books? Um, I would say 99% of the time they're super excited about it. They're like, yes, of course. Let me know when it comes out. I want to get a copy because it does two things. Number one, it adds value to the work because now you have a published piece of artwork and you have the original.
Absolutely.
And two, it now becomes a thing where you can have it as a conversation or as a bragging piece where you're like, you have people come over and be like, hey, check this out. Oh man, that's a really cool cover. You want to see the original? I got the original. And then you break it out
Absolutely.
because it's that excitement that you get when you want to share stuff with other people that are again like-minded and they go, oh, that looks amazing. So
I
that's happened. I don't know. We could talk about that, Phil. There's a couple of things that I've done for you that
We're gonna
that
get
we
into.
can we can go full circle and say, okay, let's make that into a published cover for something that's
Oh
coming
yeah.
up or a Kickstarter or whatnot. And I'll definitely let you know about that. Yeah, this one for sure.
I
Yeah,
was
we could
gonna
work on
say
this one.
that silk looks like it's on the road to being one of those pieces that shows up in a Kickstarter. Um, just like I'm anticipating seeing what you're gonna post on social media with that. That looks killer. I mean,
Thank you.
really was impressed by it. Another thing I want to point out with that Psylocke, the psychic knife, which I briefly mentioned before, it looks like you did that with the absence of color. Like the knife is formed based on what you colored around, which is, I don't think I've seen somebody take that approach before.
What you're describing is the negative space of using the white to actually create the illusion of form and using the background almost like if you're carving into it to kind of shape it into what you wanted. I also again I was fortunate to go to an art school that taught and I had my teacher was an ex-commercial artist. Like he did commercial art for about 25 years and then he decided to go into teaching. So he poured all of his knowledge into me as kind of like a mentor. And one of the things that he talked to me about was about the concept of less is more and using certain shapes to like really create the illusion that you're doing a lot, but you're not doing a lot. In this case, yeah, I could have gone in and done like a lot of colors and stuff like that, but I really wanted to give her a strong color background to pop her forward.
Right.
And I thought the best idea would be to just kind of like work my way around the idea of doing the energy and using the white of the actual paper as my white source. And that's another thing that I talk to Phil about a lot. I don't like some artists will go and they'll cover like the entire, like if they're doing flesh, they'll cover the whole cover the skin tones. They'll cover it with like one marker tone, and then they'll gradually come back and add white using color pencils or paint markers and things like that. I like the idea of using the white of the paper to establish where my highlights are going to be, because for some reason I feel it's more vibrant than if you go back and you try and cover it up with like a muted matte color, like white out or whatever it is. And I also adopted this method because when I used to go to conventions, people would bring me original covers that were done by other artists to color.
Right.
And one of the things that I noticed is they used to use like liquid paper and whiteout and all kinds of stuff to like bring back the white of whatever or the highlights, and it was a nightmare. Like I couldn't color over it, and some of it would be discolored. The liquid paper would turn yellow over time, and they would be like, "What can you do with this?" I'm like, "Well, I could scrape all that crap off and then go back and like use like real paint to bring back those highlights." Um, so that those experiences is what kind of like shaped my style of using the paper to establish where my highlights are and then building my color slowly over that without covering the highlights. And that's what you see here. The only time you ever see me go out of that is right here,
Okay.
right here.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I didn't say negative space right away, because it's like a very sophisticated way of using negative space, but then coming back to defining the form. Um, I don't know. That was next level for me, man. Or the sketch
Yeah,
cover with Psylocke. I mean, it's so easy to just say purple and do like, something that looks like a lightning bolt and call it
right.
a day. That is work. That is
Yeah, it's
phenomenal.
always kind of crazy to see how you come up with your ideas for the poses and how you like even with the silk more or less. It's like how do you come up with the idea to even just this is what you want to do? Because I know you never really do the same thing. You might do something similar, but never something twice. Not that I've noticed anyway.
That's really the hardest part. When it comes, I think for me, inking, coloring, that's kind of like putting myself on cruise control and then just letting the process happen and using my tricks and my skills to be able to create the image that I want or the final product. Where the real work begins is when you have a blank slate in front of you, when you have just a white piece of paper, and now you have to come up with an image that is not going to be derivative or is it going to be cliche, or that even if it is your traditional pose, that you can add something different to it. And also fill the needs of the client. In Phil's case, he wants a full body piece.
Always.
So when you do a full body piece, you're working with a sketch cover that sometimes the title will take up 30
Yeah.
to 40% of the actual book. So you have a limited amount of real estate to work in. So, and now you have to be very selective as how the poses. There's one piece that I think Phil has that has a rogue lifting like a big rock or something like that. And I did it. And it was huge title. So I'm like, how in the hell am I going to do a full body of Rogue? So I had her kind of crouching down, kind of like if she's trying to lift this massive boulder over her head. And that's how I was able to kind of like use foreshortening and the fact that I'm compressing her body in order to fill that space. And sometimes you have to use your imagination as to like, how am I going to work with this space? He's been a lot better now. He brings me like sketch covers that have like very little titles, or the titles are off to the side
He's
or
trying to
something
make it
like
a little
that.
easier for you.
He tries to make it a little bit easier for me. So, sometimes
Oh,
I have to use foreshortening, like bending a leg or yeah, that's a perfect example.
Very cool.
I mean, look at Age of X-Men Alpha. That's like right there. That's about what,
Right.
25-30% of the book right there.
Yep.
But you did a great job of figuring out what can go in that space that will fit with the lettering. Like you put something there that gives us a sense of rogue strength, and it still respects
It's
the
elegant.
title. Yeah, and we see just the right amount of rogue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think of it this way. Imagine if you were doing a cover that would eventually get published. Like if you're an artist, you're gonna do a cover, and it's gonna get published, and now you have to kind of think within the lines of, okay, this is gonna be something that's gonna catch somebody's attention. If they were walking by a kiosk at like your back in the days, I used to walk by a kiosk on 7-Eleven, and they had like the comic books, and I used to see
Mhm.
Image comic books, and they always stood out because of the dynamic, the images, the colors. Sometimes they did close-ups, or it was always something really crazy that caught my eye from a distance. As I was heading towards getting a donut, I'm like, wait a minute, what is that? And then you see that, and that's been the way that I kind of look at things, and I'm like, how do I make an image interesting enough that if it wasn't a commission, if it was a published piece of art, would it stand alone well against a bunch of other covers on top of a newsstand? And that's how I usually work with Phil and his requirements. Sometimes he'll say, "I just want a half body," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, I can do something like that." But whenever it's a full body, then you have to be you're more, you have to do a little more thinking to work with composition, whether or not the image is dynamic and interesting visually, and whether or not it's going to really stand out once you do all the bells and whistles and put the icing on the cake with color. And
And like you
like you
said,
said, it's very hard. It's very hard to try and be original all the time because there's only so many ways you can put somebody in a pose.
It's like, thankfully, that silk's gonna be on this, so, like, he's got a lot of real estate to show what's gonna be
right?
actually on
Yeah.
this one, so
Yeah,
On
it's
that
not as
one, if you
bad.
notice, there's a building, like part of her leg is covering just the one. So when it covers the one, then I'll be able to work it in a way that even though it may cover the one, or
Oh, yeah,
overlap
it
the
covers the
number
one,
one,
yeah. Yeah.
um, it's you'll still know that it's the title. It says Ultimate, and at the same time you'll have elements like buildings and things in the background
The
that will
buildings
fill
and
the
stuff,
background space.
got it. But I do think what you pointed out about thinking about published covers, yeah, the Virgin variants or the books that have the title dress not as like minimized, it's
Hmm.
becoming more common. But at the end of the day, with comics, the original thinking was exactly what you described. What would stand out, in a sea of comic books and magazines, you have to work with that title dress in mind. Um, so what you can put there that helps tell the story, gives us a sense of who that character is and what they can do. That goes back to the creativity of the artist. So to just kind of ignore that and only work with the available or obvious real estate, lots of people do that, but you make that extra effort to really integrate that into the composition overall. Not saying you're the only one who does it, but it's something that shouldn't be taken for granted. I think that people should be aware that that's part of Jose's thought process.
Thank
He's
you.
looking at that title dress and he wants to actually make that work with the artwork that he has in mind for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's at the end of the day, I just want the customer to be happy. Because that's what it is. Like you want to make people this. You have to understand that this is, like I mentioned before, this is a luxury. So when you're doing something, you're kind of like an entertainer. An artist is an entertainer. We're telling stories, we're creating art, we're doing something to evoke an emotion and a feeling, and a sense of, and express something that is either sadness or happiness or whatnot. But the idea is that we're here to entertain you, and I think that's, again, we talked very briefly about AI, but it's like that's part of the human condition. humans understanding other humans and doing the best that they can to interpret whatever that other person would want to see, as opposed to a cold machine just giving you spitting out a bunch of,
Right,
like pretty nice images that just look exactly like everything else. It looks like a cookie cutter type of thing,
right.
you know. But that's a topic for another another
I was-
interview.
and believe me, we are going to touch on that on this channel some more. I've done brief little video clips going over certain controversies with AI, but I do think it's at that point where it's going to warrant its own extended conversation. Um, just because, again, I think a lot of people don't quite understand why artists are saying that, the latest service agreements with Adobe and with all the social
Meta,
media providers,
Meta,
right? I mean,
and
it's
Instagram.
obvious that they're setting a stage where they feel like we're going to train our AI on whatever it comes across. Pretty much, as long as you're using our platform, it's fair game. And there are some, yes, there are some exceptions. There are some differences, for example, with what's going on in Europe. It seems like there's a little bit more protection in terms of what you can check that you agree to,
Hmm.
but it seems like they're now making these changes. But what was going on before this stuff was announced? You know, do people think that they weren't giving
Oh,
these
absolutely.
AI programs access to all the visual images that were there? They definitely were doing it. They're now just trying to protect themselves and they're putting it in to the service agreements.
Right.
People are looking, but you got to think, well, if it's just being announced, what the heck has been going on, the past 6 months, year, 18 months? Because
I can
AI
I, can- I
stuff,
can go back as far as like Pinterest. Everybody that you go to Pinterest and Pinterest pulls everything, anything that I've posted, and real quick story. I had an artist that actually was copying my work verbatim, like literally, like he would take the image, trace it, try and color it, match it, whatever, and sell it as his work. And when I caught him on it, he says, "Well, it was on Pinterest. So like it's not." I'm like, "Yeah, it's on Pinterest because it's a piece of original art that I did for a customer, and that customer or I posted it because he wanted to share it with the world. It wasn't, like an
free
open
game, stock
invitation for
images.
you to go and copy it and then make money off of it, off of something that doesn't is really wasn't made by you." So that right there is plagiarism, plain and simple. But now with all these beautiful terms and AI and everything, and I find it funny that they are utilizing, they need us to provide the raw material
Material.
for them
Yep.
to create something to replace us. It's like, if it was really designed to be a standalone thing, why didn't it just evolve on itself? Why do we have to plug, these artists into it like the Matrix, and then now you're like, okay, well, thanks for your contribution. Now we're going to replace you.
It's very scary. I think that we're still in the early stages. That's the other thing,
Yeah.
like because as the AI gets more sophisticated, who knows? But bottom line, what you were talking about, just in terms of creating art that in some way can connect with people on an emotional level, nostalgia. Those are things that just don't happen when you type in a prompt. you know
Yes.
Superman looks cool standing on Daily Planet. Like, you'll get something and it may look nice, like quick glance, oh, that's cool. But when you commission work and you have a chance to have a dialogue with that artist, and you know that
Hmm.
that artist is really thinking, about what you like, what they haven't done, it's just its own thing. It's
Yes.
incomparable. Thank you for checking out the Fandamn Collectibles YouTube channel. If you like this content, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and stay tuned because we'll be back before you know it.